so thank you all so much for coming out. We're going to go ahead and get started. If we don't already know each other, I'm Dawn. I'm the communications director for Yes on Prop 139. And before I hand the mic over and get started with our evening, I just want to say thank you to our amazing storytellers, because I'm sure you can believe that this is only one of hundreds of requests I've made of them over the course of this campaign. So thank you again for your bravery, for sharing your story to make other people's lives better. We're going to go ahead and get started. For our friends in the press, our storytellers from this point on are available to speak with you afterwards, as well as we have a number of people from the campaign here. Ashley's going to head out shortly after. She's been working a very long day. But Nicole, Kristen, Morgan, and Jennifer are all available for interviews afterwards. I'm going to go ahead and hand over the mic and get us started. Thank you again, everyone.
Hi, I'm Bree Thomas. I am the executive committee for Prop 139, so thank you very much for all you're doing. Chris and I have been at this for probably close to 2 years. I have aged mightily in those 2 years, but I'm excited for November 6th, so thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Dawn, and thank you all for coming out tonight. We also want to take a moment to thank Sam, who runs the amazing community art space and was so generous to welcome us here tonight. So thank you, Sam. We'd also like to acknowledge our legislator who is in the room. Representative Ortiz is here with us tonight. Thank you for your support, and we know after this passes in November, you'll be hard at work at the legislature ensuring Arizona becomes a state that protects and supports women's bodily autonomy from that day on. As Dawn said, we'll hold the discussion until after each of these amazing Arizona women have spoken. But at this time, I want to welcome once again our speakers tonight: Ashley from Mesa, Nicole from Flagstaff, Kristen from Tucson, Morgan from Phoenix, and Jennifer from Mesa. Your generosity and willingness to share your experiences is what inspires all of us to do what we do, less sleep, to make Arizona a better place for you, our daughters, our sisters, our nieces, and our friends. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you everyone for coming and giving me this opportunity. My name is Ashley Ortiz, and December of 2023, I was 39 years old and excited to be pregnant. I was going to have my first baby. I hoped for him for a really long time. And on the Friday before Christmas, I was at my routine 20-week anatomy scan when I went into preterm labor. So the scan showed that my cervix had opened and his foot was already out of the cervix and protruding. At only 20 weeks, my baby was not yet viable. He would not survive, and my husband and I were devastated. Under normal circumstances, the doctors would have administered medication to help me deliver the non-viable fetus safely. This would have been a short hospitalization with low cost and low risk of complication. Because of Arizona's current abortion law, these were not normal circumstances. Arizona's harsh and heartless ban made it illegal to go through with the best course of treatment. I had to get much sicker before the doctors would be legally allowed to help me. I was told that I had to stay in the hospital and wait until his heart stopped or I developed a life-threatening infection. Regardless if this took days or weeks, my water had already broken and the risk of sepsis was high. While my husband and I waited for our baby to die or for me to become critically ill, we had to schedule a medical abortion in Nevada for the following week, just in case. There I was, fearful for my life, imagining a drive out of state in the middle of my labor. I was terrified that I would deliver him in my car, in the middle of the desert, and without any medical assistance, and that I could bleed to death or die from infection. I knew that my future fertility and my life were being risked by this barbaric state law. I labored for 2 days like that, and at first, when I could still walk, I would walk the halls, hearing other women giving birth to children who would live. Eventually, my blood pressure was so low that I could no longer stand, let alone walk. I lay there realizing that my non-viable fetus, a fetus that could not survive, had more rights than I did under the Arizona state law. Considering this was a deeply wanted pregnancy that I was devastated to lose, it feels ironic to say that we were lucky when our baby's heart stopped on Christmas Eve. Only then were the doctors legally allowed to administer medication for me. Once I was given the appropriate medication, I delivered him stillborn within hours. I felt relief, and also sadness and anger, and then fear. Because I had been forced to wait so long, the placenta had clotted to my uterine lining, and I couldn't deliver it on my own. I had to have an emergency surgery early Christmas morning. The procedure took 3 times longer than it normally would have had I been allowed to receive timely care. It was traumatic. I can still hear them vacuuming my uterus. I still think about my husband sitting there alone, waiting for me to come out of surgery. It was supposed to be 30 minutes, but then at 40, 60 minutes, 80 minutes passed, 90 minutes, no one came, and he thought I had died. I feel so grateful today that I did not die. That said, I left that hospital wounded physically and emotionally. The doctors and nurses, though, were amazing. They were competent and kind and handcuffed by the laws. I could see how horrified they were that they could not give me the appropriate medical care, medicine that they could have used 2 years prior, before the ban was in place. Imagine doctors being forced by politicians and judges to provide inadequate care to the patients that they swore an oath to protect. I can still see the anguish on their faces. This was entirely unnecessary. Had Arizona politicians not decided that they know better than doctors, this trauma would have been completely avoidable. The loss of my baby was inevitable, but the lengthy hospital stay, the emergency surgery, the trauma, they were all not. Arizona's current abortion law inflicted this unnecessary experience on me, and unless we pass Proposition 139 to enshrine a right to abortion in our Constitution, this trauma will be experienced over and over again by countless other pregnant women. I deserve better. The women of Arizona deserve better. You all deserve better. And that's why I'm voting yes on Prop 139, and I ask you to do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. That is, I think, the most spot-on story I've heard thus far. Thank you all for being here tonight. I come from Flagstaff bearing pine cones. If anybody would like to take a basket of pine cones, please feel free. Instead of buying them for $4.99 and a little package from Whole Foods. It's free. But you're going to have to smell these up yourself. I'm sorry about that. You're right. You're right. Get the cinnamon spray. Oh. It's good. It's been an amazing election season. I've been able to share my story with in a number of places with a number of people, and I just feel like that by sharing our stories, we're building this collective, this network that is going to be a force and going to enshrine rights for women and reproductive rights in the Arizona Constitution, and will do so next time in the U.S. Constitution. On August 18th, 2022, 2 months after the Dobbs decision came down from the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, I wrote an essay for the New York Times. I predict that my 17-year-old daughter will become a doctor, I wrote. She knows everything about the gut biome, dopamine, and herniated discs. She does not look away when others might. Like when my mother unexpectedly texted me pictures of a cyst she had removed from the back of her head, sitting bloody in a specimen cup. That's exactly what I would do, my daughter said. You have to show people. I don't mind looking at such things, though I would like a little warning. But here, I offer little warning, except to say that if not for the existence of Roe versus Wade when I got pregnant, that conversation with my daughter would not have happened. My family and I would not have our lives together at all. This is my story. I ask you not to look away. In 1982, when I was 10 years old, a 14-year-old boy molested me. He was supposed to be babysitting me and my younger sisters. After the twins went to sleep, the babysitter and I sat on the couch watching MASH. He started caressing my arm, then my neck. Then he took off my shirt and my pants, then his clothes. He lay on top of me and had intercourse with me. I had a vague idea of what was happening. I didn't really know how wrong the babysitter situation was. I was flattered by the attention, but also confused. Why me? What does this mean? Was he my boyfriend? Why did we have to keep it a secret? He continued to molest me for more than a year. I haven't always used the word molest. I felt too much guilt and complicity. I'm still prone to feeling both. I'm not sure if that's a product of the molestation, or if that is my personality, or if the two can even be disentangled. When I was 11, he impregnated me. I used the active verb with me as a direct object intentionally. To get pregnant suggests he threw the baseball and I, knowing it was coming, caught it. I did not mean to catch anything, nor did I know how to avoid doing so. My mom, who was already worried about that something seemed wrong, figured it out. "Are you pregnant?" she asked. How did she know? Maybe it was pure motherly intuition. In 1983, abortion was legal across the United States. I did not feel lucky to get an abortion. I felt like garbage. The babysitter did not have to go to the clinic. The babysitter was not shunned and shamed by our community. Most people didn't even know what he had done. Only my mom and I were subject to the shame of entering that special building for that special procedure. Although no one in the neighborhood or at school talked to me about it, I could feel the electric gossip surge around me. The freedom to choose wasn't what I experienced in 1984. My abortion wasn't a choice. It was my life. If I had been forced to give birth, I wouldn't be texting my mom about the removal of her cyst. I wouldn't teach at Northern Arizona University. I wouldn't be working on a book about climate change. I wouldn't be married to my husband or have my 2 children. I would be a prisoner subject to a body's whims, and not my body's whims, but the whims of a teenage boy who, as best I can tell, experienced no consequences. When Roe versus Wade was overturned, I felt the prison gates fall around me. Pregnancy and childbirth change life trajectories. How could someone decide what direction my life, these kids' lives, should take? I was so angry. I felt so disempowered. I felt like I'd been relegated to a second-tier citizen. How could my daughter or her friends believe they had powerful voices when they had no voice about what to do with their own bodies? So I came out with my story in the New York Times. When I published the article, I was sure I would get hate mail, but I didn't. I got words of support. The strength of your truth is palpable. Your imagery makes a hot button issue real and personal, wrote Kathy. Thank you for opening up to the world, for sharing the grief and pain and social opprobrium that are visited on young women for the decisions they make. And thank you for giving us a personal account of how the Supreme Court has violated our trust, wrote Josh. The connections I made transformed my relationship with what had happened to me. All the shame I'd felt for having been sullied, duped, and ostracized disappeared. The word abortion didn't signal spoilage or scum. Because I could shape my story on my own terms, whatever detritus that had attached to me from that molestation or the abortion fell away. It was my story to tell, and telling it to 1 million readers was the most empowering moment of my life. I cannot predict what my life would have been like if I had been forced to give birth when I was 11 years old, but I don't think it would be as various and surprising. A few months after Roe was overturned, I was invited to speak at the College of the Holy Cross about my books. The audience was composed mainly of undergraduates and Catholic undergraduates at that. They only wanted to talk about the New York Times piece. They didn't ask why I wrote the article. They asked if I was okay after having published it. They asked what the response had been. They asked what the hardest part of talking about abortion was. I said, the hardest part is that everyone expects it to be hard. A local reporter interviewed me and asked me if I had a photo of myself at 11. And for the first time since I wrote the article, I broke down. It's one thing to tell the story of a girl at 11 who went through these things, but to look at her photo and see her alone and scared and so on the verge of something life-defining
or worse, a month younger, having no idea what was coming. I think, what if she'd been forced to continue that pregnancy? What would the next year's photo look like? I wouldn't have been able to recognize that girl. But now, I can look at my 12-year-old girl photo and know that she's been through a lot. And with time and love and community, she could be here working on this campaign with all of you. Thanks.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Kristen, and my husband and I had to leave Arizona to get the health care we needed after making the heartbreaking decision to end our pregnancy that was very much so wanted. After giving birth to our amazing son in 2021, we decided to try for a second baby. When we got pregnant in 2023, we were ecstatic. My first pregnancy had been flawless. Even the labor went well. And our son is really amazing. So we started planning for the arrival of our next baby. Things had been going really well until an abnormal test came back in our second trimester that changed our lives. 3 different doctors confirmed that our baby had a list of medical anomalies, including one of which would require her to have surgery while I was carrying her. What's more, even if she survived that complex surgery and everything went well for her and for myself, and then labor, the doctors told us that our baby would live a short life full of pain and surgeries and constant medical care. After going through our diagnosis in what felt like excruciating detail, our doctors did tell us we had the option to end our pregnancy and save her from this painful existence. But because we were past the arbitrary time limit for care, they were unable to help me get that medical procedure here in Arizona due to the bans. I was in shock. To me, there had always been this wrong, I know it's wrong, but there had always been this implication of an abortion meaning wanting to end a pregnancy. And I wanted this pregnancy to continue more than anything. I always believed in a woman's right to choose, but it was really a turning point in my understanding at just how much the medical procedure of an abortion was interconnected with fertility care and the act of wanting to have a baby. With unbearable emotional pain, my husband and I made the heartbreaking decision to travel to New Mexico and end our pregnancy. Because of my gestation at 18 weeks, we knew we had to hurry. Instead of spending the last few days of my pregnancy giving my baby girl love and mourning our loss and grieving at home in Tucson, we were tasked with all of the logistics of traveling out of state. We were so lucky to have the endless support of my parents. The night before my abortion, I fell asleep in a strange short-term rental in a city I did not know, holding my husband and trying to cherish these last few moments with my baby. I was beyond devastated, but also angry. So angry that politicians who knew nothing about my situation had more control over our lives than we did. The next morning, when we arrived at the clinic, I was greeted by protesters outside of the clinic, yelling at me, telling me that they could save my baby. They couldn't. I couldn't. Yet again, people with no knowledge whatsoever were making judgments of me and my family situation. No matter how someone personally feels about an abortion, they should not be allowed to control what someone else does with their own body. Neither the government nor other people should have more say over your personal health care decisions than you do. Every pregnancy is different. Every patient is different. And Arizona's current ban ignores that and says politicians have more say than a doctor does with their patient. Before it happened to me, I never thought, or at least I really hoped, I wouldn't have to make the decision to have an abortion or that these bans might affect my family, but I absolutely always believed in a woman's right to choose. Now with this personal experience with Arizona's cruel laws, I know I can't stay silent. It has been a little over a year since our heartbreaking loss of our daughter, who we named Micah Joy. We are still healing and we are still grieving. Nothing could have changed Micah's diagnosis or the absolute heartbreak we felt at losing her. But what could have been different is the pain we had to go through being forced out of state, all of that additional stress, never mind the additional expenses and the loss of autonomy over our own lives as Arizonans. I do not want any family to go through what we went through. I find hope in working to protect abortion access in Arizona, first by voting yes, and then passing Prop 139, the Arizona Abortion Access Act. Everyone should be able to get the health care they need close to home. These private and personal decisions should be made between a woman, their doctor, and their family. And that is it. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, all of you. My story actually took place in 2020, 2 years before the fall of Roe v. Wade. And it's a story I share today and will share until I'm blue in the face. Many of you have already heard this. But I feel the need to, because I need everyone to know what it looks like after decades of abortion extremism and white Christian nationalism in our state, and what that has done to our healthcare landscape, coupled with the dangerous ban that is current law. It continues to harm women and deprive every patient of their most fundamental right to make private and personal healthcare decisions for themselves in their own home state. So my husband and I were delighted to learn that I was pregnant 3 weeks after our wedding. We were a little deer in the headlights, but we were very excited. I was 37, so that is considered a geriatric pregnancy, for those of you that don't know. And so we were even more delighted to learn that we were expecting twins. And then we were excited to learn that it was a girl and a boy. And that is where all of our excitement stops. So at probably the last appointment that we would ever be excited about, we learned that the male twin had a critical heart defect. And the doctor was very clear that this was dangerous. It was already a high-risk pregnancy, being geriatric, and that it was even more dangerous for our healthy twin daughter and for me. It posed all kinds of terrifying risks, and she suggested that the safest course of action is something called selective reduction, which is abortion. It's also referred to as multi-fetal pregnancy reduction. So she explained this to us, and that there was one facility in Arizona that could provide this. We were farther along in some of those arbitrary gestational weeks, and the clock was ticking. This facility in Arizona could not help us, and so she let us know that we should have our bags packed and be ready to go on a moment's notice. She was looking all over the country to find care for us. And so we were relieved actually when it was in Los Angeles, because we were talking about New York or Washington, D.C. This was also March of 2020, so we all remember what that was like. As the world was shutting down, I was 20 weeks into my twin pregnancy, and we were able to access the care that we needed in Los Angeles, California, in an operating room, in a hospital, because it is health care. And $9,000 later, up front and out of pocket, a week on bed rest, and we had boarded our dog, we had traveled across state lines, we headed home. And what happens with a selective reduction is you still have to carry that pregnancy. So for the remaining 4 months of my pregnancy, I carried my healthy twin daughter and my dead twin son. And I hid, as we were all required to stay indoors or at home, and that meant that a baby shower was out of the question, which was fine by me. I didn't want that. I just wanted to get through it. And in July of 2020, I went into labor and delivered both fetuses, our healthy baby daughter and our dead twin son. They were both vaginal deliveries, and we were excited. We were shattered. We had wallpaper chosen. We had names for both of them. This was not a decision for me. So the words choice and decision are tough for me, because this was necessary health care, and this entire experience was traumatic enough, but it didn't need to require me to cross state lines to access the care that I needed. And so the state that we love very much and we call it home and we always want it to be a better place, but Arizona really let me down, and I can't watch it let anyone else down. So thank you.
Thank you all for being here this evening and for finding this important enough to really stand behind it. And thank you all for sharing your stories. This is the first time I'm sharing mine publicly, so I'm really inspired by all of your strength. Thank you. My name's Jennifer Schutz, and I currently live in Mesa, Arizona. At 14 years old, I found myself in an emotionally and mentally abusive relationship with a much older boy. Legally speaking, he was a man. Looking back, it's easy to identify how he manipulated me, but as a child, I didn't have the experience that would have helped me to understand that. And it wasn't long before I was coerced into a sexual relationship with him.
He told me he loved me and I was special and all of the things. One night, he drove me the 30 minutes from my home to his own empty house. And when he started to undress me, I somehow managed the courage to say, "I'm really sorry, but I don't think I'm ready for this." And to this day, I'm still proud of the brave little part of me that brought those words out of my mouth. Unfortunately, they served no purpose. In the moment, his response was, "Too late. You already said yes, and you can't take it back. You're lucky I'm going to be gentle." I suppose he was gentle. There was no violence, no hitting or screaming or frantic struggling to get away. Just numb, silent, terrified, and painful surrender. When it was over, as he walked to the bathroom to take a shower, he commented over his shoulder, "There are t-shirts and shorts in the bottom drawer and frozen burritos in the kitchen." I think I must have put on those shorts and t-shirt and made myself a burrito. I honestly don't remember that part. I do remember that when he came out of the shower, he made himself a very nice meal and ate it in front of me without offering to share or speaking much to me, other than to tell me I have particularly ugly feet. I don't, by the way. My feet are adorable, just for the record. Very soon thereafter, he came back around telling me how much he loved me and how beautiful and special I was and all the things abusers do to keep their target from leaving. He also remembered to mention frequently that I was now ruined for anyone else and that I was a dirty slut, and I'm lucky he still wanted me at all. As I wrote this, it was hard for me to wrap my adult head around how the 14-year-old me survived this way for months. He was very cruel. He would humiliate me in front of his friends and then apologize and hold me and tell me very sweetly how he loved me and needed me when we were alone. As a child, I had no tools to recognize or escape this pattern, and I was terrified of him. I had witnessed him throwing tantrums when his mother tried to get him to do something he didn't want to do. He would throw pots and pans in the kitchen at her, just completely unhinged. And it was then that I learned how to be quiet and invisible and agreeable so I wouldn't set him off. And that's a behavior I've struggled to unlearn for much of my adult life. A few months later, my mother started noticing things, changes in my behavior, changes in my body, and changes in my menstrual cycle, which was still very new anyway. Finally, she asked me, and the floodgates opened. I cried, she cried. I agreed to take a pregnancy test, and to our shared horror, it was positive. And in that moment, I believe that she made the best, bravest, most loving decision possible and set out to find a place where I could have the pregnancy terminated. People may judge her for that. Many already have. But I will be grateful to her for the rest of my life for making that call. A few days later, my mom and I traveled from our small town to the city where there was an abortion clinic. I remember that it was very clean and welcoming and looked like a small hospital. The staff were friendly and welcoming. And when I was taken into the room and I handed my clothes to the nurse, I had this very clear moment handing over my underwear. They had little Christmas trees printed on them. And I had this moment of stark realization that those were a child's panties, and I was there for an abortion. And the contrast of those two truths, even at 14, was very clear in my mind. Before the procedure began, I remember them asking me if I was there by my own choice. I remember thinking about how afraid I was of him and the idea of having a baby at 14, with no money, no resources, not finishing school. So many adult things ran through my head right then, and I had no doubt that this was the right and best thing to do. I didn't feel lucky to have these choices. I felt defeated and terrified and broken and lost. And I didn't realize in that moment how precious that choice was and how privileged I was to be allowed to make it. As I lay there with the sound of the machines and the feeling of the nurse holding my hand and dabbing the sweat from my forehead, memorizing the poster of the French Alps pinned to the ceiling tile above me, I did my very best to block out any other sensations. The nurse just kept reassuring me and telling me everything was going to be okay. I believe that having that abortion was the best decision for me and my family at the time, and 34 years later, I have zero regrets. I believe that this option should be available for anyone. This is a profoundly personal decision and oftentimes a medical necessity, though those opposed seem to gloss over that last part and make it all about women who get themselves in trouble. I'll be honest, even today I'm nervous that speaking publicly could have negative repercussions for me. But more than that, I'm certain that I cannot stay silent and do nothing when this choice is being ripped from the hands of the young women in my life and in this state. I hope they never need to make a decision like this. I hope their sexual relationships are mature and healthy, and that if they ever get pregnant, they're excited about it and it goes well. And for anyone who has a different experience, I hope they at least have the freedom to consider this as an option when deciding what is best for them. And I hope they have this medical care available if their life or fertility is endangered by a pregnancy that didn't go as hoped. I hope that minds and hearts are opened by my story and all of our stories, so that people can understand what it is that we're really talking about here. I hope our stories help other girls and women know that they're not alone, that they don't have to feel ashamed or be silent. Staying silent is how the stigma and the mystery and the lies stay so strong, and likely how we find ourselves here yet again. You won't find me shouting or beating down doors or judging others for their choices, but I will not silently comply. My days of being quiet and invisible and agreeable are behind me. I'll be voting yes on Proposition 139, and I deeply hope that you will too. Thank you.
First of all, how did I get the job of following all of this? You all are wonderful and amazing and brave, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and probably representing everyone else on the campaign for doing this. I know that can be difficult, but this is so important, and your stories will absolutely change hearts and minds. So thank you. Y'all are really amazing advocates, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how we put your willingness to share to the greatest use. So one thing we can and should all be doing is speaking out in support of Prop 139, especially now that ballots are arriving in people's mailboxes as we speak, and probably a lot of you will be getting them tomorrow, right? But I wanted to ask each of you, you're doing so much by sharing your stories. Thank you, thank you, thank you. what would you all ask of us, right? How can we do justice to your stories and your willingness to share what you've been through? And anyone can start.
I really think have the conversations with everyone. You know, my husband and I have had a lot of conversations with family members that have been very uncomfortable, but very important, and we're still hopeful in them. Having the conversations with friends. I know when my husband and I drove to New Mexico, we didn't tell a soul besides my parents that we were going to have an abortion. And on the drive, my husband said, what are we going to tell our friends? Is it going to be that we lost our baby, or are we going to tell them? And I remember thinking about it. And then on the drive home from Albuquerque, all the way back to Tucson, I said, we are telling every single person we know that we went to Albuquerque and we had an abortion, and that was the best decision for us and our family and our son. We are telling everyone we know we had an abortion. So talk to anyone you can, share the stories, and have those uncomfortable conversations.
I just want to reiterate this idea. Even if you don't have your own story, feel free to share ours or mine. You know, I think these stories really are what is building such a successful campaign, and that real people are behind these stories. And I also feel like, okay, you are going to vote yes. Now you need to get 3 other people to vote yes with you. Take them to the polls, take your ballot to them, show them your sample ballot, make sure they don't, because ballot language is, a lot of the manipulation from the other side of the campaign could make it confusing for some. What I love so much about this campaign, it's very straightforward. Yes, it uses the word abortion very clearly. The word abortion, I feel, has lost its stigma. Abortion care is health care, and we have made that point over and over again. I think everyone here, everyone's story here affirms that. So just using that word, using the straightforward campaign and saying, it's very simple, just check the box. Not really a box. Fill in the little circle. Our ballots arrived today, but I was here.
Y'all are good. Okay. So each of you have shared getting to this point of publicly sharing your experiences, and it didn't come easily or automatically, right? For other people out there, people in this room, people who have their own stories, who are trying to decide when they're comfortable and what they're comfortable sharing. Do you have any advice? Or was there a moment or feeling that helped you realize that you were ready to share your story? I see some head nodding over there, so I'm bringing.
I think that it's important to stay true to yourself and what's safe for you and your family and your emotional well-being. And I know that I was able to get access to therapy to help me be able to cope with the feelings that I'm having today and the things that I went through. And I was very lucky to have that. But honestly, a major reason that I'm here today is actually because of Morgan. I watched her share her story, and she inspired me, and I've actually known her for over 20 years now. And I just want to say thank you for everything that you've done and that you continue to do.
Also channel your anger, right? I mean, that feeling when that happened in June of 2022, I was like, no more silence, no more shame. Channel that anger and do something good with it. Put your story out there if you can, and if you can't, do something else, right? You donate more money, put up a sign, advocate for others, whatever you can do. I think just make that anger do something.
I think for me, we were also, I really admire that you just told everyone right away. We didn't know how to do that. We didn't know how to untell. And everything was so complicated and, with so much going on. And we had a birth certificate and a death certificate at the same time, which was just a lot to I'm still processing all of that. But I think I started to identify so much with some of these awful bills down at the Capitol, and I just got pissed. And I think there's going to be a point, if you are considering sharing your story, where you identify with something happening and it feels personal, and then you just get so pissed that you have to. So, yeah, get pissed and do something.
Part of your question was there something specific that happened? And for me, it was when the memo was leaked that they were considering pulling back on Roe versus Wade. And I'm usually pretty mild-mannered. I think that's fair to say. I've got some friends here who've known me a long time. Something inside of me just broke, and I didn't even know it was there to begin with. And I was angry in a way that I didn't know how to define, and sad. And I just felt like there was something that I needed to do. I had no idea what it was, though. And fortunately, I have a friend who is sort of once removed from some people in the campaign and got me connected and gave me an outlet to start sharing my story. And once I haven't shared the whole story until this evening, but once I started speaking to people about it, so many people came back and said, can I tell you about my experience? Or I had to make this choice too, or this thing happened to me. And there's strength in numbers. There's strength in that energy building and people being willing to speak out loud about it. And like I said when I was speaking earlier, I think staying silent and being ashamed and letting that be normal is part of the problem. And if we can just take a breath and get over that just for a moment to share even whatever we feel like we can share with our story, it empowers and emboldens other people to do that as well. And we can create a powerful movement by sharing. So thank you all for doing that.
So the moral of the story is get pissed and destigmatize abortion. And that was your first time telling that story? I would have never known. That was amazing. So thank you all again. I'm standing in front of the speaker because it's doing a funny thing. Thank you all again. And along the lines of our best and highest impact here, don't forget to take some merch in the back. We've got some yard signs, we've got shirts, we've got buttons. And following the bravery that we've seen tonight and advocating everywhere you go, right? So especially with folks who most need to know these stories. In support of Prop 139, the Arizona Abortion Access Act. Thank you all so much, very deeply from the bottom of my heart for doing this. This has been a long couple of years, and we are right around the corner, and we're going to be successful because of your stories. So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all again so much for coming out. These ladies have agreed to do additional interviews, to answer any other questions. Please take snacks with you and be careful driving home. And again, to these women who have become my friends through this journey, thank you so much for everything you're doing. We're going to win soon.